Okay, good afternoon to everyone, to all the participants to this webinar. This is the third of a series of webinar on 5G in the time of pandemics that has been organized by the Florence School of Regulation. And I'm Maria Alessandra Rossi. I'm a professor of economics of innovation at the University of Chieti Pescara, and I'm a member of the scientific committee of another twin program at the Robert Schuman Center, which is the Florence competition program. So today we are going to address the more technological aspects of the broad theme that is the core of these seminars, this series of seminars. And in particular, we are going to deal with IoT solutions for the post-COVID-19 era. And so we'll go for a look into the opportunities in terms of technology that this pandemic has generated, as much as this might sound strange to say, and the challenges that lie ahead. And I'm particularly happy to introduce you the three speakers for today that have very hands-on experience in key areas relevant for the topic that we are going to address today. And the speakers for today will be Salvatore Loreto from Ericsson, who is a strategic product manager and works on 5G core related products. So he will help us mostly on the connectivity side. Then Enrico Scarrone from Telecom Italia, who is, well, he has a role in Telecom Italia and also in a number of standardization bodies. So he will help us more so he's chairman currently of the steering committee of 1M2M and has previously acted as chair also in different bodies. And then we will have Tony Shakib from Microsoft, who is IoT and Intelligent Cloud Business Development Executive at Microsoft, who will give us a perspective on that other side of the value chain. So let me jump directly into the discussion, because I think that everyone is eager to hear from our speakers. I'll just tell you a little bit the dynamic of this event. What we are planning to do is to go for 2 rounds of interventions, for 2 rounds of contributions from our speakers, starting from a more short-term perspective, so looking at what COVID-19 has taught us with respect to these technological aspects, and then looking a bit further away into the future. So we'll try to cover through this double perspective 3 key technological areas that correspond to the expertise of our 3 speakers. So we'll address issues related to connectivity and particularly to cellular connectivity. Then we'll move on to consider issues of standardization and interoperability. And then we'll look more at the technological platform perspective. So this is a little bit the plan. Of course, we'll be very happy to receive any question from the audience that may help to make this debate more lively and also more in line with the interests of our varied audience. So feel free to intervene. Unfortunately, it is not possible to intervene directly, so in person or by raising hands, but we will use the chat. To this end, I will just remind everyone to, whenever sending a question, to use the option all panelists and attendees, so that we all can read the questions and we can avoid duplications. So let me start from connectivity then. And one thing that we all know that connectivity is really an indispensable enabler of all the technologies that we're going to talk about today. And the pandemic has been an enormous stress test on the resilience and on the strength of the networks. So our starting point will be from the enabler, and I'd like to hear from Salvatore what is his perspective, what is his view on the results of this stress test. So how networks have performed in these pandemic times, and what have we learned from this experience so far?
Yes, thanks a lot, Maria, and thank you for having me here. As Maria.
Oh, Salvatore, I cannot hear you. I don't know if it's only my problem or.
No, it's also from our side.
Okay.
Now?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe it's okay. So thank you, Maria. I was just thank you for having me here, and just saying briefly that again, reintroducing myself. My name is Salvatore Loreto, and I work as a portfolio manager in Ericsson in Stockholm. And I'm taking care of the digital service part of the portfolio that includes product related to 5G core for both consumer and enterprise. So related to the question, Maria, what we have seen, and we have also read and experienced during this time around the world, that the overall effect of the pandemic has been an acceleration transformation of the society. But that has, of course, an effect, has had an effect on the network, increasing incredibly the demand for broadband communication service. On average, we have seen an increase on the internet traffic of around 60% compared to before the crisis. But this is an average. That means that we have had peak of even 200% of the traffic compared to the average used on before of the crisis. That has been an interesting stress test because all the telecommunication world, not only the cellular world, usually it's always set in a way that has to manage a certain amount of traffic and only some peak in a certain time of the day. But incredibly, it seems that all the engineers that have been working around the world, not only in cellular, but also setting up all the internet around the world, have done an incredible job that not only from the hardware side, but also from the protocol side, from all the aspects that make it possible for us to communicate around the world. And the network so far has been able to cope with this increase of the traffic. All the network operators around the world, and also the content providers, not only the one that provide the connectivity, but also the one that provide services on top of the connectivity, have been able to successfully maintain the service, utilized efficiently all the pre-existent capacity of the network. And in certain cases, we have also seen and helped some operator to expand the capacity of their network on the flies. All these as shows that the network is doing a great job. And has helped the society to survive during this period of the time. If we look from the IoT part of of the coin here, the network has also shown resilience towards the IoT devices. As we all know, the IoT devices have a different pattern when it comes to the traffic, the latency required, and having the IoT traffic competing with all the other traffic that has increased enormously has also showed that from the IoT side, it has been done a good job. So everything has worked very well, because of course the IoT traffic has not increased because this is a machine-to-machine traffic, and has not been really affected that much, that traffic from the pandemic. But that traffic has had to compete with all the rest of the traffic from human that have generated much more video conferences, much more other type of traffic. And I think that that's is yet another credit that we have to give to all the engineers that have built the internet since the last, well, the end of the last century, so to speak. And if we can then zoom quickly to the IoT, in particular, we as Ericsson, of course, also give particular attention to the IoT connectivity. We monitor what is happening to the cellular part of the IoT connectivity. And just to give some number, at the moment, of course, the number of IoT devices accounts to billions around the world. But if we just consider the IoT devices that are connected to the cellular network, that are the 2G network, the 3G network, and the 4G network. At the moment, the 5G, the IoT devices connected to 5G are almost inexistent because it's too early. But the number of the IoT devices connected to the cellular network accounted at the end of the last year around 1.5 billion devices, with a year-to-year growth, a CAGR of around 25% of year-over-year. What we have noticed is that it can be obvious, but just to share with you, is that during the first months of the year, of course, this growth has completely stopped. And that's it's because this growth is mainly driven by China. China is increasing the number of IoT devices by, I think, 1,000 or 100,000 per day. But at that time, in January, February, it completely stopped. And there were several reasons, of course, because China experienced a sort of lockdown before the rest of the world. It was around January, February when they started to stop everything. And then we started to notice no new devices connected to the network from China. And also started to affect the other side of the world, because China is also the main providers of SIM cards, and SIM cards are the well, it's the fundamental part to connect a device is to insert still this small piece of plastic inside the device, and those SIM were basically not available anymore because China shut down the production for a couple of months. But then in the second quarter, so starting from April, May, China restarted to grow the production, and we have seen a bump on number of connection. Now it seems everything is off. Everything, if you look from the IoT world, everything is normal. We have already seen a recovery on number of connection. We see a growth also day by day in number of connection. And that's because, again, connecting to the beginning of my answer, is one lesson that has been learned here is that there is a lot of beneficial to have things connected in the enterprise world, because that means that those things and facility can be operated and monitoring remotely, no matter what are the conditions of the pandemic. And that's, I stop here, so I can not use all the time. Let the others.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for now. We'll be back in a while. Another thing that the pandemic has shown very clearly is a desperate need for technology. So it has become clear in the minds of governments and of lay people that technology may help very directly in the short term for fighting coronavirus. And many have turned to IoT solutions and other technological solutions to wage this fight. And I think that Enrico Scarrone can help us to identify what are the latest technological developments because of his experience, very hands-on on the processes of standardization. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alessandra. In my activity jobs, essentially I deal as coordinator of IoT standard and IPR activity inside Telecom Italia mobile team. What's happened is that during the year, there was a big investment for a lot of companies standardization. Standardization can be made based on what is called de jure, so made through the normal, let's say, the official standard bodies, but there is also standardization de facto when solutions come out from the market and become the most used of the market. Independently of how it happens that the technology solution are become available, we are currently using a lot of these things, and these things as big enabler for IoT. Just to make, we range from the connectivity that Salvatore mentioned over 5G, where if you go around with the same cellular around the world means that someone has made a deal, an agreement about how we should work. Else we will not work around the world with components from different providers, developed in different time by different companies. That's the enablers, and the enablers are several in the area of telecommunication, but there are several also in the area of IoT. What's happened in IoT is that all these enablers are a sort of range of technologies. There are several. What's happened is that this technology have already shown themselves that as technology themselves are in most of the case enough to provide the services. There are still big area of innovation in the area of artificial intelligence in terms of security using distributed ledgers. There are a lot of areas which are still subject to further enhancement, but de facto, what was available even some years ago was already a very good base. What was missing really is the ability of putting together this technology and the information between these technologies. So basically, it's not a matter of availability of technology, it's more a matter of how the market shape and what are the relations. Currently, I think that for every actor, including the big one, it's very difficult to create a big ecosystem around their solution. The market is extremely fragmented in the area of IoT. There are, I don't know, I think thousands of solutions deployed, especially industrial IoT, where practically everyone is developing his own things. Now, the problem is that if when you arrive in a situation like that, where you have really a lot of technologies available, the problem is that everyone is dealing with his own specific problem, and some players try to solve more problem. And I think that we have some talk about that even after me, immediately after my talk. But the key problem here is that we tend to mismatch the idea that putting something in cloud or mismatch that a sort of remote control is IoT. Is not yet IoT. When you are right to, the point is to share the information carried with other parties which use different technologies and try to put together the information and leverage of this information to build services and build also more sophisticated services, because we know that if we are able to share things, we can create much, much more value. Now, this is the process which is in delay, because the number, as mentioned before by Salvatore, are very high, but are far below the expectation that we had a few years ago. And that's a little bit the difficulties. And the real showstopper is really these difficulties in put the things together. Just to say that the technology are there, and what is trying to do is, let me say in another way, if a market converges by itself, there is no need for a strong standardization. If a market delays the ability of converging itself or try to find a solution, then standardization has a role in trying to push this. Basically, what's happened is that this hole was already identified a lot of years ago, especially by the telco guys. The reason why the telco guys identified it before is essentially because the telco people has already experienced the problem of put together the same technology in the area of cellular. So we did this process in the 90s. Now we have to try to make this process in the area of Internet of Things and push for that. And I would not really like to push any technologies, but it's clear that whatever solution is adopted is extremely important that this solution is able to create an ecosystem, but also share this ecosystem with other technologies, because it seems that nobody at this moment is strong enough to make this push to arrive to a 50 million or 100 million of devices connected that was promised. In every analyst made this analysis around 6-7 years ago. It's not so much 6-7 years for having a so big difference in the number. Seems that something is blocking the evolution, and this is exactly this fragmentation. I will stop here because I think other speakers have to talk. And we'll have more interesting questions afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much. So my next question will be quite clearly for Tony Shakib. And there is one word that we've mentioned many times, that is resilience. And we've talked about it in terms of resilience of networks, but also whole systems need to be resilient. So the entire economic fabric of our world needs to be resilient. And we have discovered quite abruptly how much we need resilient systems, resilient supply chains, for instance. And so this is something that we have discovered very clearly with the pandemic, and very like dramatically with the pandemic. And so my next question, this is an area where surely 5G and IoT may play a very important role through remote controlling of processes, through other means, and I'm curious to hear what Tony thinks in terms of the platforms and the technological solutions that will be more important in this regard in the immediate future.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having us on this panel. It's a great topic. You know, we're very busy, you know, these days working with many of the largest enterprises around the world to really help them solve, you know, many of these COVID-related issues. And by solving, you know, it really falls into 3 different areas, right, that most companies are wrestling with. One of them is like, how do I run my business remotely? If I'm a manufacturing plant, if I'm an oil rig, you know, whatever that environment is, you know, how do I run it, you know, more effectively and run it, you know, remotely? The other area is, how do I safely get people back to work, get people back to shopping, and give everybody the confidence that, this is a safe environment to be in, even office buildings, the way they go in and out. And then thirdly, it's all about supply chain diversification. Obviously, there's been a lot of disruptions in the supply chain and the number of resources, both upstream and downstream, and how do you manage that? And I think IoT is a great way to address every one of these issues. And as Satya said, we've been working on these digital transformations with many companies over the number of years. Many of them have had big plans, for years to do this. And now all of a sudden, it's a matter of survival. It's no longer like a nicety to have, what they were thinking about in 2 years. Now they want to get it done in 2 months, and they're serious. And we're happy to help them do that. So the answer to your question, Alessandro, is, look, when you talk about IoT, everybody automatically thinks about M2M and connectivity. And even though connectivity is important, but it's only part of the equation, right? And what we're trying to do is to really holistically think about what is that end digital solution that the customers are looking for, and what are all the pieces that we need to bring together, to make it happen. And the best place to do that is actually in the cloud, right? Where you can create a platform of which, you can rapidly add applications, and then, you have real-time visibility to all of your assets by connecting to them, and then, managing a new set of solutions that you can bring together and deliver it. And then the other thing that's important is that there's really no one company that has all the solutions. So the ecosystem and the network effect is equally important. But you need to have a foundation. You need to have a platform, which is really at Microsoft, what we're trying to do is to create that hyperscale, trusted cloud of which every one of these applications can reside. All the connectivity solutions could be extended from it. The data could come in, it could be analyzed, intelligent decisions could be made, and really amazing things could happen. So in terms of some examples of these amazing things, I mean, it's one thing to talk about technology, is another thing to think about practical applications. Right now, we're literally working on hundreds of different applications, of which, it could either be delivered directly from the cloud or from the edge. And certainly with 5G, by having that compute even closer to where the action is, then these things are becoming more important. For example, we're working on things like a intelligent store in a box, right? That we could drop ship a set of solutions, to the retailers that can count the number of people that go in and out of their store, so they can manage the amount of traffic and congestion. They even have, we have thermal cameras that can detect if people are running a fever. We have AI algorithms that can look at the images in an anonymized way to see if they have a face mask or not. Are they 6 feet apart? Even the air quality, we can measure it all in real time. And these are all the information that's necessary to make sure that there's a safe environment for people to go in and out to do their shopping. And then at the end of the day, there's like 3 different constituents that we want to make sure have real-time visibility of the data. One is actually the tenants in the building, or the shoppers, or the people. We want to make sure that data is available on their phone so they can see what kind of environment that they're going in. The second one are the operators of the store or the commercial buildings. So they know that, do they have the right hand sanitizers in the right place? Are people using them, or the real things are happening? And thirdly is actually the real estate developers and owners, to make sure that they can make the right investments and have the right things in place to make all of that happen. So we go to great length in every single one of the industries that we're in. If it's manufacturing, how do we create a plant that has all these IoT solutions that runs a lot more smoothly, and the supply chain is taken care of? If it's in healthcare, same thing in the hospitals, clinics that are, highly congested these days, of how do we manage these solutions for them? If it's, a commercial building, How do we make sure that the number of people that enter the building, how they get into the elevators, that they don't even have to use their hands to decide where they go. They do all these things with their own personal devices, and how they go for lunch and managing the traffic. You know, these are all great things that are happening. And Alessandro, one of the things that I wanted to say is the great thing is, even though there is a real need today because of the pandemic, many of these solutions are going to be here and have value beyond pandemic. So these are the things that will just allow people to run their businesses a lot more efficiently, manage the supply chain a lot more effectively. And we feel that it has long-term effects in many years to come, even post-pandemic, as hopefully we quickly resolve things and move on. So very exciting times. And we really feel that the platform, the cloud platform, is really the glue that brings everything together, that allows you to connect to things, to get the data, to monitor things, and continually add innovative solutions, whether it's in the cloud, whether it's in the edge, but in a very seamless way that people can consume it and take advantage of these solutions.
Thank you very much for now. I'd like to go back for a moment to Enrico Scarrone. You mentioned earlier on the distinction between standards de jure and standards de facto, and that triggered into my mind the idea that maybe this is one time when we need, for some applications, standards de jure very quickly. And you mentioned in a conversation we had technologies such as contact tracing or like group testing. And I was wondering whether that's an area where it's obvious to rely on more structured effort, like a standard de jure, or if the negotiations might be difficult to address and paradoxically might retard the effort.
Yeah, thank you for this question. Let me grab 1 minute. Before it was mentioned the fact that there is this demand, and this demand has found already some application available. Things to one which was experimental some years ago, but that was augmented reality in order to manage maintenance or or construction. Now, augmented reality becomes a need in a certain sense, because you cannot have all the people expert present, so you have to really benefit from the expertise of other people. And there are a lot of these services already available. Now, as you mentioned during a conversation, I mentioned one thing which is strictly related really to help the people to relieve from the pandemic. We asked to ourselves early this year what IoT can do specifically to fight the virus, on top, of course, of all the other services which were available. And we thought about this possibility to have some mechanism which try to check if some environment are contaminated by the virus, and to try to have a possibility for the people to know if they were in that environment at a certain point in time. That's a sort of a contact tracing, but it's like you are tracing your contact with an environment where it happens. I make an example because it becomes very much more easier to understand. Things if you are in a car of a metro underground system, if I'm able to filter the air of this underground system, and I'm able to test this air, I immediately can know if someone in the car has been infected, and I can in some way provide two information at the same time. One, the fact that I'm making a sort of group testing for all the people in the car, because if I detect it, means that at least one is infected. The other thing that I can do, still respecting completely the privacy, allowing these people to know that they were in a place where the contamination was found. And this can be applied to air, is applied also to water. Think for the bathroom water in a commercial center. Immediately you know these things. And this kind of testing, there are several companies working on the automatization of this mechanism. It can be done by hand, but to a certain extent, but it can be also highly automatic. What's happening is that the standards, that's the great thing of the standard, provides all the rest: security, privacy, communication. It's all available. We don't have to invent anything. So just plug in this functionality of retrieving this information from these detection points and using available technology, for example, Wi-Fi, we can advise the smartphone that they were in that particular location. And they can go periodically to retrieve from a central point the places which have been infected with some level of infection. So at the point they can assess, the people can assess if they need to be tested or be very risk of exposure, essentially. And they can decide if more action. And even at that point, it can be given some indication from the health authorities. All in respect of the privacy. I don't know where you were. I don't know that you have been in contact, but you can discover the places. But I need some mechanism. And we plug it on the IoT standards available. And the nice thing is that we start with job of standardization in May, and we finish the standardization in December. It's very close. So that means that all the fragmentation that we have experienced with the human contact tracing application, which are all different, and now we try to put them together, very similar but different. This time the standardization will arrive before the market. So I really hope that the market adopt the standard and we avoid this fragmentation of solutions. We can have one solution which can work, at least in all Europe. Better if it is all the world, but let us say, at least in all Europe can work. And nice thing is that we develop these things with some party which were already experienced, because the work is made in ETSI, with which is the European Telecommunication Standard Institute, with a big participation also aspect from the sector, both from the citizen part, Association of Citizens, but there were also INRIA, which is the French institution which have developed with the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany, the equivalent to the Italian Immuni, the contact tracing. Something happened. Yes. Like how a ground ready to be used framework for standardization can allow to have a relatively quick time to market of a solution, which is not. Sometimes people think that standardization is low. Standardization is never low. Let me say, it's never late, in the sense that if it is late, the market have already found a solution. When a standard is applied, means that was needed on the market. So that's a little bit one thing that people say is late. No, it's not late, because when it is late, it's not used. Simply. Thank you.
That's an interesting perspective. Let me just ask one clarification question, a very dumb one, very simple one. Who are the adopters of these standardized applications? Because
now, we have two sides, because on one side, the technology is based to use normal wireless access point, Wi-Fi access points, but needs to be coordinated. So there are different use cases of these things. Some are related simply to offices we want to monitor on, or authorities who want to monitor common spaces, public spaces. And that's our kind of thing, but we go even to the owner of shops or a big shop, but even simple shop, because at the end, the only thing that they have to install is an access point and have it configured in a certain way in order to associate this access point with the point of detection. That's so that gives a little big, potentially very wide base of use. The other side, of course, it presents the same problem that has the other contact tracing application. It requires that the user on the human side install the application in order to collect in this case, the MAC address of the places where they have been according to certain rules. So it's needed to have an application that collects this information, then goes to the cloud to retrieve that info, the list of let me say, of the contaminated places. That are the two sides. I cannot tell you practically because the standard is undergoing. We have contact with some company developing the solution for this automatic detection, which is on the way. It's not something that we can do it today with some let me say longer time of polling between the detection. We are not able to make this detection, for example, every half an hour or every 5 minutes. But there are companies that are trying to find a low-cost automatic way to make this kind of detection. And when it is available, it is in any case useful to deploy it even with longer, long interval, because you can in any case trace the information. But it will be very more interesting when the technology hopefully will be quickly mature. As I said before to you privately, I hope that we will be late. In the sense that the pandemic will be finished. I
share completely this perspective.
Because it's ready, but I'm 100% sure that having something like that, if not used for this pandemic, will be maybe ready to be used for another pandemic, because what we learn is that we don't know when, but it will arrive another one. And we need to be much more ready what we are today. And IoT can really give a big role. As said before by Tony, this pandemic is also be pushed for this using this technology and break some walls which are made, mainly psychological or business wall, which were made against the wide diffusion of IoT. Now, most of these walls, or this part of these walls, it does not exist anymore because the needs are really go much far beyond.
I think this is a very optimistic view, because I firmly believe that humans, like behavioral economists, have made tons of experiments showing that no matter what, humans tend to underestimate the risk of very little probability events. So I think that we'll behave exactly in the same way in some years from now. We'll easily forget everything. But in this regard, just to conclude the line of thought, I think I just want to clarify with you if you think that standardization can help, in the sense that by taking care of all of these aspects, as you were mentioning, like privacy aspects, security aspects, all at a time, they may a bit help to overcome the single individual's resistance to download these applications, to use this technology.
No, you know, one thing is that if you look at the experience of what we had, for example, in the cellular, which is more close to my environment, you look that there was a big work of standardization, the jure, all the standards that we are using in terms of 5G, 3G is really made as a formal standard through recognized standard body. But on the other side, what's happening? There was a big contribution from the bottom, first with the World Wide Web, then with some standard, industrial standard like MPEG, which have made all the communication more easy. And then arrives also something that, I don't know if you call it a standard but de facto you have two operative systems on the cellular which have made the big change. Is there this way of putting together some parts which are standard de jure, we need probably to be more legally controlled or legally assigned things, all the regulation and all the license work in the cellular, together with something which arrives from the markets. And when you put these things together, you can get really big things. And that's exactly what I expect for IoT, is this kind of mixing of things. The fact that there are some standards push some companies to open their wall and push to a more open view and try to get to create a bigger market and be more active on the market, just to exist, and even if it is not adopted, no, is a push. On the other side, the real effort made by the company that can decide to use a standard or not make the real change of the market. If they use a standard, because they think they benefit, that's how I try to make it. But the function provided by the standard are not functions that can be forgotten even by proprietary solution.
Okay, thank you very much, Enrico. Tony, one thing that you were mentioning earlier on is that the solutions, the applications that are being developed now during the pandemic might be very useful also in the future. So you were hinting at the fact that the pandemic has changed something, but presumably it's just a small change in the course of things. And I had a question in this regard, but then another question came from the audience, so I'm going to link the two to connect to this thought, to your previous thought. And my question was, is there some technology that will be damaged by the pandemic? So some technology that will not, that will be challenged by the changes induced by the pandemic. So I'm thinking perhaps at an area that is not necessarily core to Microsoft, but maybe there are other applications that I don't think of. So I was thinking about self-driving cars, and that area there is if people tend to, the economic downturn might have some serious effects in that area, as people want to pay less for cars and not more. So my question would be, is there some technology or some application that you see more promising, more that benefits from the pandemic, and some other that is damaged from the pandemic? And then a question came in that is also that also concerns who wins and who loses, and the question is more strategic: China versus US, rest of the world. In particular, the question is China coming out first from the pandemic can get some strategic advantage in IoT technology. So the timing of the pandemic can influence who gets a head start in IoT. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Honestly, I think the way we think about it is like technology is really a tool to solve problems, but it's also up to the people to see how they take advantage of it, right? And it's an amazing problem solver, in many industries. So for the most part, we don't think anything will be damaged, but rather we feel it's creating new opportunities for people to be a lot more effective and deal with the pandemic, and also take advantage of what they're doing right now in the way they do business in the future. So, I mean, there's no question that there's certain industries right now, if you look at manufacturing, automotive, retail, they've been hit hard. And it's not the technology's issue, it's just the global events that are going around us. But, the rise of technology is really helping people, deal with these issues, much more effectively. For example, robotics is one of the areas that's been talked about quite a bit. And right now we see really creative companies coming out in a very short time, and they're creating robots that for food delivery in high rises, instead of having people go and, be exposed, they put all these things in a little robot, and it's self-controlled, and it can go to different floors and deliver things in a very effective way. Now, not only is this solving the problem for the pandemic, but in the future, you could see that this is where things are going. And it's just a much better way of, delivering services to people. We're seeing amazing things happening in the area of drones, and how we could use it, for detecting, certain things that are happening. So, in terms of the question, of, you know, the damaged industries versus industries that are thriving, I honestly feel the question is more about this is affecting everybody, and the people that take advantage of technology and digitally transform themselves faster, they can deal with the pandemic more quickly. They could be a lot more effective, and then they can also apply this to future. Uh, you know, digital transformation, ultimately it's all about data, and it's all about smart, you know, AI, machine learning, and cognitive services. IoT is just a means of bringing the data, but then it's a matter of what do you do with the data. And, you know, certainly, you know, the Western nations, China, everybody's investing quite heavily into the AI technologies. And wherever, you know, they're being used, I think they're recovering from COVID faster, but it's the matter of discipline of you know, listening to the data that the technology is giving them and doing the right thing so they're not infecting others. And whatever it's not being used, you know, it just, there's nothing you could do about it. It's not that the technology is not working, it's just people not paying attention to it. So those are the things. But overall, I think that there is a bit of a hard time ahead of us. We still need to get the vaccine out and distribute it. I mean, the distribution of the vaccine is not easy, you know, getting it to billions of people. So there's plans that are going into it. And certainly technology, cold chain, supply chain is going to be at the heart of it. It's the only way to make sure they can monitor the temperature of these things and the way it's being administered. And, you know, it can really help solve problems, you know, for now and in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Since you spoke of vaccines, there is one question exactly on that, that is basically whether you envision that it is possible to use the IoT to monitor and optimize the vaccine supply chain, considering that like the current vaccine that is ahead in the race seems to have quite heavy requirements in terms of.
Absolutely. So really, you know, IoT comes into play in several places. One is in the manufacturing process. You know, it's pretty involved on all the piece parts that needs to come together and these things to get manufactured. The other part is the supply chain and the cold chain. To, as you know, a lot of these things have to be temperature controlled. Sometimes I hear minus 60 degrees or whatever. So to be able to monitor that it's not, you know, it doesn't fall below these temperature variations and it safely gets to its destination. It's another place that the IoT can really help solve the problem. And then the third area is the way it's being administered to people and the reaction. And how do you get that information from various patients that are already in trial, you know, and get that real-time data back to the researchers. Really, IoT plays a role in in each of those three areas: production, distribution, and then the enforcement.
Thank you again. Salvatore, Loreto, we are back to you. We haven't forgotten you. And I know you might be interested into bringing us a little bit forward into the domain of regulatory changes and regulatory framework to reflect a little bit on how the new technologies that we've been discussing today and the problems that they raise might change a little bit the perspective from the regulatory side. So if you want to give us a little bit of contribution on this as well. We cannot hear you, not yet. Not for the moment. Now we still have some problems.
It looks like harmful.
Yes.
The problem.
No.
Now, I think now.
Yes,
okay.
yes, now it's working.
Unplug the mic. Okay, so let me start from touching some point from Tony. When we talk about IoT, of course, the value of IoT comes from top, from the platform and application that use and make together all the data that are collected from different sensors. Connectivity is really, really a small part of all the value chain of IoT. And there can be several ways of providing connectivity to IoT sensors. The majority, of course, are plugged through fixed connection, even if at the end it's a Wi-Fi at home, but let's go back to broadband fixed connection provided by the operator. There are part of the use cases that IoT is involved in that really required mobility and then wireless connectivity. In this aspect, we have two different family of technology, the one that are regulated and the one that are not regulated. The one that are regulated, of course, are the one coming from the classical telecom world that are in the family of the 3GPP evolution technology, cellular technology. So it's the 2G, 3G, 4G. I keep saying 2G because we still have a lot of devices around the world, IoT devices, that are still using the 2G technologies. It seems really an old technology now for a lot of us, but there are hundreds of millions of devices in the industries that are still getting connectivity from 2G. So coming back to the fact, when we talk about regulatory connectivity, then the telco world is slightly different from the general IT world. In the IT world, you have all the freedom to experiment and provide new technology, new standards. In the telco, we are more regulated. So here it's an interesting story. When we started to provide connectivity to the IoT devices with the cellular, we were just using the broadband part of the connectivity that you can use on your phone to browse the web or to do any over-the-top communication. But then at some point, we started to see something really interesting. For example, there are already countries, and let's say, for example, Japan, that now has said that if an operator provide connectivity to IoT devices, then it has to follow the strict rules of 5 nines. So that connectivity has to be up all the time. So the 5 nines means that the connectivity have to be working all the time. The only, let's say, downtime that is allowed is only 6 minutes per year. In an entire year, the connectivity has to be up all the time. We have only these 6 minutes that are allowed. And maybe if we have to do something really important, we have to do in that time frame to update the network and do all the rest. And it's really important, because if an operator doesn't respect that regulation, he can lose the frequency and going out of the business, right? So it's important, and we will see more and more focus on this, because of course there will be more and more use cases that will be moved over this kind of connectivity, because they have the assurance from the operator that their connectivity will be always there. And with 5G, of course, it will also bring the assurance about the bandwidth will be always there, the latency will be always there for allowing all those use cases. And we have also started to receive requests from enterprise around the world saying, okay, now you provide 5 nines, but you know what, we want 6 nines. That means that we go down from 6 minutes through, I think, a bunch of seconds of downtime over the year. And that will require a lot of work for our friends in the standardization. So Enrico will have to understand how to make this possible. And of course, there will be a lot of investment from all the chain. So then what can be done? So I think that it's important to understand that not all the devices, not all the IoT use cases require the same strict rules. So I think that the regulation, I hope the regulation will allow in the flexibility to discriminate between services and services, and give the flexibility to, okay, the really critical services and the non-critical services. Another thing that I think it's important to understand, I am not very well updated on that, but if you are following the 5G discussion debate around the world, now I think all the countries have already assigned the frequency from the broadband connection for the consumer user. But there are already countries like US and Germany that have also started actions for the industry to provide a license spectrum to the industry, so that the industry can build up their own private network and use that for connecting all the devices and really transform their way of doing business there. And that's the other things that the regulator have to work on, because of course the industry, I think also all those enterprises will expect to have the same flexibility that IT world is bringing, and not to be over-regulated as the normal telecommunication. So how does new setup of the enterprise 5G communication for private network will be regulated is also an interesting aspect that I think also you at the university will have to work and research on how to solve this problem in the best way that help the economy of those enterprises to evolve and the technology to spread around.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. So thank you very much. I'd like just to give the word to any of you who has any final thought before closing. If you want to add something, or were stimulated by some of the thoughts that were shared today. And let me say that it was a very interesting discussion. I'm on the study soundy. I'm not on the edge of technology. So for me, it was absolutely fantastic to be able to hear your perspectives.
I think that that's also short. So, sorry, if I may. That's also, I think, hearing from you that I think that's make me happy, because it means that we from our side are doing the right things, that you can use the technology without knowing all the details behind that. And I think that's the beauty of, okay, it's really make my day. They say, okay, now people can really and use this technology to make their business, to improve their life, and do whatever they want. They don't have to care about the details and the configuration. So sometimes it's like connectivity is there. It's like water, electricity is always there. You don't care about how it comes to you. It's there, right? Of course, the only times that you complain is when something is not working, and we are there forced by regulators to make sure that this time when it is not working is really minimized or removed at all.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And from my perspective, at the end of the day, this is all about the ecosystem, and I think it's like solving a puzzle. At the end of the day, there's a lot of challenges that we're going through as humanity, and technology is a great way and a great set of tools to solve these problems. But it's like a puzzle. We have to come together as a community, put all the pieces together, and make sure that with standardization, these things snap together much faster, and it's a lot easier to build things and go to market and experiment and drive the innovation forward. And it's really exciting times, and I think technology can once again help solve many of these issues, COVID and post-COVID, for all of us.
I'd like to make a little comment still on the regulation part, because we get this topic talking some years ago with the people which are working on the ethic of IoT, for which we can derive all the legislation and then the regulation. But one of the things that was very difficult is also in talks with regulators is the fact that it must be understood that there are two aspects which are extremely relevant in this moment. One is that it's even difficult to regulate by service, in the sense that when you deploying an IoT service, you have a mix of technology. We talk about just the connectivity. It's very rare that you have only one kind of connectivity in a real IoT service. It's a mix. You have a cellular, you have some part which is using Wi-Fi, some other part using other technologies like ZigBee, so it's a mix of these things. You have to use the different technologies in the correct way, in the correct piece of the service. So it's even difficult to regulate the service. I think this is an extreme point of attention, that the reality is much more complex, and additionally is very, very changing quickly. The business model, the services behind, for example, the relation which was mentioned before, edge and cloud. There are some in artificial intelligence. There is an executing intelligence in the edge, and the more, let me say, sophisticated real intelligence that try to get all the information and tune the algorithm at the edge. These kind of things is extremely difficult to be regulated, and we need to be very careful to have the correct regulation to help the final user, and also to allow a fair competition. But at the same time, it's very easy to over-regulate in this area, because nothing can be really fixed, and that I think is an important aspect in the evolution of IoT. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you. It was really a pleasure to have you all here. I'll just remind all the audience that there are still seminars in this series, and the next one will be next Thursday at 4. And this time the topic will be on 5G patents in the context of global trade and competition. So we'll go even a step further up the value chain at the patents. So thank you everyone for attending the seminar, and thanks to all the panelists, and see you next time.
Thank you, it was a pleasure.
Thank you.